Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Van Holtz back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. Hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the table from me, it's Mark with the Warehouse Republic. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well, doing well. I feel nice and cool here because it dropped from like 105 degrees down to 91, and it's like, oh man, I can put my jacket back on.
Yeah, absolutely. I got in last night, did a long walk around the city, and it was actually quite pleasant.
Yeah. Now, you're like, are you born, raised Texan, or how long you been here?
Yeah, I was born Dallas-Fort Worth area, just, a little bit west of the airport in a little city called Bedford.
Okay.
And yeah, just have kind of bounced back and forth, and I've had a love affair with Austin since about 2007. I've lived here 3 times since then, and now I guess permanent residence is still up in the DFW area. But yeah, I spend a lot of time out in California and a lot of time in North Carolina right now.
Yeah. You and I share a mutual friend, Mr. Will Roman of
Yep.
Chisos.
Shout out to Chisos Boots. Absolutely.
I've done an episode with Will in the past, and I've got one scheduled for the future. So if you don't know anything about Will, he's definitely a great person to listen to and kind of like pick his brain.
Yep.
So what I want to do is maybe like give our listeners a really quick 30-second pitch of what you guys are and what you do and how you make the world better.
Yeah, absolutely. In a nutshell, we are a 3PL, which refers to third-party logistics company. Back in 2015, I started 2 Fulfillment by Amazon businesses with a couple different partners, and we found ourselves with some very seasonal products and very quickly started to feel the pain of long-term storage fees if you didn't sell through a season or if you mispicked a SKU. And so we started looking for ways to solve that warehousing problem for ourselves. And in doing so, we started thinking, well, this might be interesting for other people as well. So we opened up, we ran a couple of ads on Reddit as a small, cheap experiment, started getting customers, and then figured we had to go open a warehouse.
So there's a couple of weird things with this. First of all, I don't sell anything on Amazon. I have no idea how it works. And I'm sure my listeners are probably like churning in their seats just hearing that. But so I guess it's super expensive to store your products with Amazon?
It can be. Where Amazon fees get really, really expensive is October through December when it's, Q4 surge pricing. It's really a way to look at it. They only want the fastest moving products in their warehouses. And it makes total sense. And the other thing is if you miss on something and it stays there for more than a year, then you start getting these, what they're called long-term storage fees. And they amount to, it's very, very expensive. I think it's like $2.40 a cubic foot right now. I might be wrong on that. I hadn't looked at it in a while. But if you think about a pallet of goods, and if it's that pallet stacked up to 72 inches tall, then you're talking about 74 cubic feet of goods. It's a very, very expensive, and it's a recurring monthly charge. What used to be a biannual charge. So you'd have a 6-month long-term storage fee, which was about half, and then you had a 1-year long-term storage fee, and they would only assess it twice a year. And so you could actually kind of game the system a little bit to where, let's say, the cutoff date was August 15th and you put something in like August 20th. Well, when the 6-month storage, 6 months later, you would miss that cutoff, and then you would then miss the cutoff again when the 1 year came along because you were 5 days past the date where they assessed it. So you would only get basically a 6-month long-term storage fee at more or less like 4 or 5 days shy of the 1 year mark. And so you could kind of game it in a little bit to help yourself out. But ultimately, Amazon switched that to say, okay, we're not going to do the 6-month long-term storage fees anymore. We're going to do just if your goods have been there after 12 months, automatically you're just going to start getting assessed on a monthly basis.
Why doesn't Amazon want to be in the storage space? It seems like just like an easy opportunity for them to make money. Are they running out of space and they can't build warehouses fast enough?
No, certainly not. They don't want, I mean, their business is about fast inventory turns and really trying to make sure that whatever's in their warehouse is selling through very, very quickly. They don't want to be in the storage business. They're in the selling goods and fulfilling goods business.
But it would just seem like, I mean, they're also in the, like website hosting business. Like, how does that have to do with anything? So I don't know. So you saw this opportunity. You're selling a seasonal product. You're getting hit with fees from Amazon. Mm-hmm. And then like the second most mind-blowing thing was you posted ads on Reddit and you had success.
Yeah.
Like, who does that? Like, how do you do that?
I mean, we literally just spent about $100, $200 maybe, and we just said beat long-term storage fees at Amazon.
Would you select like the Amazon seller subreddit?
Yeah. You would try to go to the FBA subreddit or, that kind of thing. And it worked. I mean, we got our first 2 customers, one of which is still with us today. So yeah, Will Reinert, if you're listening, shout out to you.
Yeah. Thanks for making this business exist, right?
Absolutely. And then the other one, it was a company that needed help with FBA removals. And so
what's an FBA removal? Is that like when you're taking the inventory back out of FBA? Okay.
Yeah. And that's really a worst case scenario. But what ends up happening is you just don't sell through your product. And so you get close to that long-term storage fee is about to hit and it's about to start recurring. And so what you do is you spend, let's say 50 cents a unit to get everything shipped back. And then you have to pay the shipping costs or whatever from Amazon to wherever you're shipping them. And it's kind of hard to visualize this. So you send typically all of your shipments go into like a single fulfillment center or a single point of contact. And then once it's in the Amazon fulfillment network, it gets blasted out to, 15, 20 fulfillment centers. So if you remove 1,000 items, what ends up happening is we start getting boxes from everywhere. You'll get some from Delaware, you'll get some from Dallas, you'll get some from Nevada. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. There can be 3 items in one box, 20 items in another box. And so it's a very, very messy situation. But what we end up having to do is we end up having to open every single box and then re-kit them into master cartons and then report back to the customer and say, hey, we've got master cartons of 20 and here are the dimensions and the weights. And usually, and the reason why we have to report that back is because most of the time when it comes from the manufacturer, it's a lot of times in a very oddly shaped box. And so we keep a few different sizes of boxes in stock to really reduce the cost of like what those boxes are going to be. So we just buy them in bulk and we'll fit them into whichever boxes fit the best. So if their master cartons arrived into the United States or whatever by, let's say 25s, we might have to repackage them into 20s unless they want to pay the extra, a premium to get the exact same size box that they came in.
Yeah. So, man, this sounds like such a headache. Like I would not want to deal with this at all, either as like an Amazon seller or what your business does as well. It just seems like how do you keep track? Like how many brands are you working with? And like, how do you, I guess it's just operational people are organized and I'm a creative person.
Not necessarily. We work with all sorts. Across the 2 warehouses, we've got somewhere between 60 and 80 customers at any given time right now. Your really large brands, a lot of times will just cut their losses and they'll just say dispose of the products or donate the products or do whatever. They won't even.
Like Amazon will do that? Or
yeah, they'll do.
How will they donate the products?
Amazon's got a service where if you, and I'm not sure about if they donate them, but what they'll do is they'll take them and they'll say, okay, well, we'll sell them for whatever we can sell them. And you might get 10 cents on the dollar. Mm-hmm. You might get 10 cents of what you had it priced at or 10% of what you had it priced at. So a lot of brands will just do that and let Amazon deal with it.
Just liquidate it.
And it'll be out of their hands. But some people, they get an emotional attachment because they invested their, a nest egg or some form of a nest egg, thinking that this is going to pay out. And, that's one reason that people will bring it back and they'll store it and then reship it in after a period of time. Because typically when you remove goods from Amazon, they hold them out. Like they won't let you resend much of that product back in. They'll severely limit the amount that they allow you to send back in. Some of the reasons why people will remove things is because, let's say their manufacturer messed up. And so there's something that's been, maybe the wrong color cup got put into the wrong SKU, marked box. And so we'll have to remove them, sort through them, re-sticker them, and then ship them back in for them.
So are 100% of your customers Amazon sellers then? Like, is that the market you entirely serve?
I would say of the 60, let's say if there are 60 customers, 58 of them are Amazon. And then I would say of those numbers, probably about 40% of those guys are doing an omni-channel strategy. So they're selling on multiple e-commerce platforms.
Okay. And then in terms of your services, are you guys doing any kind of like fulfillment in the terms of sending it directly to customers as well? Or are you just kind of like this intermediary between, the client and Walmart and Amazon and all those distribution centers?
Yep. So I think most of what we do is we are the intermediary between the seller and the platform or the marketplace. We do have a direct-to-consumer business. I would just say that's not our bread and butter. We do it. We have no problem building integrations from people's Shopify platforms, or we've got customers on Macy's and customers on Bed Bath & Beyond, believe it or not. So we have a lot of this, and they will say, hey, we want you to ship XYZ. So the customers flow in through Macy's.com, and then they, through an integration, basically come into our warehouse management system, and then the orders are automatically populated and we ship them out. So we do that. And I would say with our Southern California warehouse, so much of it was just, full containers in, send in 30%, and then, over the next 3 or 4 months, drip in, 10% here, 15% there, and then another container would show up. And so there's this kind of constant cycle. In our East Coast location, which is in North Carolina, that one is a lot more direct to consumer. And we focus a lot more on the FBA removal side of things. We're also exploring, re-commerce, which is, a brand has an open box and they can't sell it as new. And so, okay, well, what do we do with it? Well, let's put it on this website and see if, we can help you guys sell it as a open box type thing.
Mm-hmm. Walk me through the decision between having both California and North Carolina, like 2 fulfillment centers. Why do you need 2 fulfillment centers?
Space and coverage are the 2 biggest things. Southern California is an incredibly challenging market to get a warehouse in. So now, when we opened our very first warehouse on a monthly basis, you get your it's called industrial gross instead of like triple net, but our all-in price per square foot was around 55 cents. And then around last year, we were able to lock in our facility at about $1 per square foot. And then if you look at the market now, it's very challenging because it's grown so fast, so quickly. And now you're looking at paying $1.40 to $1.50 a square foot. And part of that is because there's the occupancy rate in Southern California right now is about 0.3%. The vacancy rate, excuse me. So you have so little space, and the space that you do have are these really large behemoth warehouses that, if you're not a Fortune 500 company, it's very challenging to get a landlord to agree without requiring, sometimes 6 months to a year worth of rent as the down payment, as the deposit. And so you start looking at, in order to expand into a 250,000 square foot facility, which is kind of that next step of where we'd like to go in Southern California, you're looking at an investment between the deposit, the racking, everything at a $4 to $5 million investment versus going somewhere else in the country that's got much less, the rates are much lower. For instance, when we were looking in North Carolina, we saw rates of 40 and 50 cents per square foot per month. And then the coverage is the other piece of it. So, you not only find from the dollar value, it's easier to expand, but then just from the coverage aspect of it. So now it's like you don't have 2-day shipping across the entire country, but we do have like 3-day shipping. So whether, if a customer decides they want to split their inventory fairly equally between Southern California and North Carolina, then now it's like you went from potentially 5 days worth of shipping to where it's like every customer is going to get something within 3 days.
Why did you decide to build in California rather than Nevada that's right next there? I just feel like doing business in California sounds like the worst idea as a Texan, of course.
No, of course. I'm with you. It's proximity to the port. And, to give an example, and these numbers are just kind of ballpark. These are on any given day, we can get a truck, assuming that the containers are released and everything works out on time. You can get a truck to bring a container to us for let's say $600 to $800. And it's probably gone up a little bit with, fuel and that kind of thing. But that's a decent number. And then to take it into, let's say, Nevada, like Las Vegas, a surrounding area, for instance, or even Phoenix for that matter, is going to cost anywhere between $1,800 for drayage. And drayage is the term from port to the destination inland. Mm-hmm. So the drayage will be, let's say, $1,800 to $2,400 sometimes. And, if it's 3 to 4 times more expensive, customers are going to be they're really looking for those California locations. And then the workforce in Southern California for that type of, for like warehouse workers and general warehouse labor, it's pretty abundant. Like there's a lot of it there. And just the infrastructure, it's the sheer amount of trucks and warehouses and pallet providers and, everybody that services Southern California is just, it's really there. I mean, and that reason is because 40% of what's imported into the United States passes through either Long Beach or the Port of LA.
So why did you pick California versus, like, what would it be? New York? What's the number one port?
Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach is number 2. So, and they're right next door to each other.
Right. But in terms of like the Northeast, isn't there a lot more demand up there from a consumer standpoint?
Well, Port of New York, New Jersey is basically it's the number 3 port in the country. And there's a lot of people up there, absolutely. But when you have a concentration of 40% of goods are coming into that little spot in Southern California because it's proximity to China, and most of our customers will import from Southeast Asia. I looked at it from the perspective of how do we de-risk this for our investors as much as possible and make sure that we're entering a market where the demand is going to be the greatest, and just the numbers said, go to Southern California.
So a client comes in and they want to split between the 2 warehouses. Like, how expensive is it to send half of their inventory literally across the country?
Well, so the last thing I did, so if you land it in Southern California, move it into our warehouse, and then we split it for you. I mean, freight prices right now via rail are around $5,300 is what we paid like a week or 2 ago is the last quote I saw. To move it, and instead to go from, let's say, China and then through the Panama Canal and then up and then land it in, like, let's say, the Port of Norfolk, the delta is a little bit less, but it's still a little bit pricier. And it all depends on which carriers are going, what demands are. That market of how much a container costs to put on a ship at any given time is fluctuating always. And especially since the pandemic, it's been just all over the place.
Yeah. So how do you, with all this variability to, shipping costs and gasoline costs and containers, like, how do you price this to your clients so that they can expect it? And how are you able to do it in a way where, from my perspective as a layman of the industry,
sure,
like seeing Amazon, you just like, how does somebody beat Amazon? Like, how does someone with a little, $250,000 warehouse is pretty big, but on the same side of thing, I would imagine like Amazon's warehouses have to just be like enormous.
Yeah. They're about to open their largest warehouse in the network right now in Ontario, California, right down the road from us. And it's like, I think 4.1 million square feet. So, it's, 250,000 square feet is a rounding error on their fulfillment network. But, you don't go from, let's say, a 10,000 square foot warehouse to a 300,000 square foot warehouse. You stage into it. And for where we are, I think 250 is just the next, what makes sense for the next step for us. Now, fortunately, we don't do anything with the trucking. Most of our clients will work through their freight forwarders to get the drayage taken care of. And then if it's going from our warehouse to somewhere else that's outside of the Amazon network, then, we can recommend some carriers that we've used. We've got some quote aggregator platforms we can use that get pretty good pricing. But because most of our clients are in the Amazon network, as soon as it leaves our warehouse, it's typically being picked up on what's called an Amazon partner carrier. And so they're getting the same rates that Amazon's getting. Those rates are basically being passed through to the sellers. And so part of why it's so lucrative in many ways to sell on, one of the, I guess lucrative is probably a bad way to say it, but to say one of the great benefits of selling on Amazon.com is their fulfillment network. Those rates are made available to you, the seller. And as they've grown, when we first started, they were just flirting with their own trucking network, but now their trucking network is who does the majority of their carrying. Mm-hmm. But they had all these great negotiated rates with these trucks. And so if you were doing a less than truckload, which is, let's say, 4 or 5 pallets in a large truck, it's called LTL, then, their truck would pop in, they'd take your 5 pallets and they'd, take it 50 miles down the road, 60 miles down the road. And that would be that. And you'd pay, let's say a couple $100. And then now it's gone up significantly, but it's still much cheaper than what you or I could go get just as, Joe Schmo wanting to ship 5 pallets somewhere.
Yeah. Speaking of, so an operator, what are some of the best practices for an e-commerce operator when working with a 3PL for you in terms of, kind of the do's and don'ts?
I think that, I mean, the biggest thing is, and this is, I mean, you really have to understand like what your 3PL's processes are. And so, 10 times out of 10, if garbage enters the system, then garbage is going to, rumble around in the system and then garbage out, basically. So garbage in, garbage out. And so you really, when you send a shipment into Amazon, they make you put carton labels on, and then they make you put the shipping label on, and they don't want too many SKUs to be on the outside of these boxes, because it could cause confusion. When your third-party logistics provider says, hey, we really need this box labeled a certain way so a guy can scan it in and put it on a pallet, and he doesn't have to question, he doesn't have to look at box markings to determine what the SKU is. These things, they sound so simple, but we've seen entire containers where, there's barely readable carton labels, and you have to almost use a magnifying glass to get in there. And, when that happens, you end up with a lot of mistakes because, the guys that are checking this stuff in, I shouldn't even say anything against the guys. I mean, I've tried to check some of this stuff in and made mistakes myself, and I care a lot.
Yeah.
So you really just want to make sure that it's not so much that like, you don't want somebody to misunderstand you. You want to present it in a way that it can't be misunderstood.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not in operations, but I guess like the boxes and all that is working with your vendors to produce that artwork.
Yep.
And get it over there. And like, do you guys have like templates that you provide to your clients as kind of like best practices? And
yeah, so we just spent a very nominal amount on development, and we've got a little portal that people log into, and they upload a CSV file, and it spits out labels in the format that they can then send to their manufacturers and say, hey, please put this on every carton, and and so on and so forth. And then that makes it very easy for us because they're still getting the box markings on their cartons. We can just very quickly look, and if something's amiss, like the guys are probably 9 times out of 10, if it's 100 boxes, they're going to catch at least one of them. And I'd actually say on 100 boxes, they're going to catch 10 times out of 10, they'll catch one of one out of 100. But yeah, I mean, we've tried to make it very, very easy for our customers to get the correct kind of labels to put on their boxes. So when it comes into us, there's no question. A guy shoots it with a gun, and it loads up into the system.
what about like when I think about like sending direct to consumers, I would imagine there's a lot of different platforms for that, like ShipStation.
Mm-hmm.
For anyone who's ever seen me on the ShipStation commercial, that's me. But also like, I don't know, like Fulfill or ShipBob or, Ship whatever.
Yep.
Are you working with the client's internal software of choice, or do you guys kind of push them towards your own platform?
So we work with a couple. We've got some integrations, and basically, so whatever platform they want to use. So for instance, we use a platform called Soapbox, these guys are doing, they basically do a lot of what ShipStation does, but they've got a couple other added little features. So Soapbox is one, and then ShipStation is another, and then Shopify stores, Magento stores. We will basically build the integrations to where it plugs into like our warehouse management system, and then we effectively we really are very agnostic. We don't care about the carriers. We don't care about where the labels come from, or if we're producing them on behalf of the customer or whatever. I mean, we just do whatever the customer wants in that case. And I mean, they might have to help pay for the development for the integration itself, but we try to be very, very flexible. And that is the thing. A lot of people just want to say, well, I'm only shipping 5-10 items a day. Can I just upload them manually? And it's like, well, you can, but you at some point are going to make mistakes. Yeah. And, so ideally everything needs to be whatever the customer enters flows seamlessly into the warehouse management system, and then we can go ahead and fulfill.
I can't imagine someone wanting to do that manually. Like, what world are you living in? But I guess
surprised. you would. I mean, it's not, and that is not a knock to people that are trying to save money and trying to bootstrap. And I get it. That's just one of those things where I think a lot of people, they don't have experience with understanding how crucial that piece is and understanding how easy it is to make a mistake. And so they want to do it themselves. And we say, well, you can. We don't recommend it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would imagine in your industry, like the challenge is like, as you build systems and processes and operational efficiencies within your business and get really good at certain things, then you have more of an incentive to like, hey, this is what we do, and try to find like the right people for that system. But, what you're saying is like, hey, whatever the clients want to do, we'll do. We're adaptable, which I would imagine leads to an environment where you're not very specialized, you're not as efficient, And subsequently, I would imagine like that becomes more boutique-y, which would be a higher cost. So like, how do you know what that right balance is between like pure efficiencies, pure like cosplay
Sure.
versus kind of like the boutique response?
Well, I don't know if I would characterize it in that way. And the reason, I mean, we have our internal processes and those are law. Like, I mean, our guys, they have requirements when, let's just for instance, shipping out, whether it's FedEx, whether it's UPS, whether it's DHL. I mean, we have daily pickup set up for carriers. So, I mean, if a client wants to ship via FedEx or if they want to ship via UPS, that makes no difference to us because the truck's going to show up anyway. But it is internal law that when something gets onto the dock, they're scanning that package, scanning it to the location on the dock. And then when it leaves, they'll scan that pallet, which we give like basically the pallet a license plate, if you will. And then they notate the trailer number that the pallet gets loaded onto or the packages get loaded onto. And why you do that is because in Southern California, especially, it's such a high volume shipping area that we'll load up a truck and it'll go and be parked in the yard and it's supposed to be gotten by somebody, but it might not be gotten for 3 days. And another thing, might be interesting to some, the vans like that we see, like, you know, they probably come here, that come to almost everybody's home. Those guys have got scanners. They scan every package onto the van. They scan every package off the van. The trailers, when you're on a feeder program, the trailers, they don't have scanners. Like those guys just take a bunch of pallets, a bunch of goods, and until it gets like offloaded at their fulfillment or distribution center, until it's offloaded, that's when it gets scanned. So if that trailer somehow gets parked in their yard and sits for 3 days, you've got customers calling up saying, why hasn't this shipped? And it's like, no, it actually shipped. It's just in the middle of a UPS yard somewhere. And it's rare that happens, but it does happen. And same with FedEx. So kind of going back to like what you were saying about, you know, boutique versus processes, our internal processes are very set in stone, but the system generates, whether it's shipping off of your UPS account or your ShipStation account, all of that is handled through our warehouse management system and it's built through integrations. And so human input, one way or the other, I mean, as long as that label is spitting out, then the rest of the processes are exactly the same. And then because we have those daily pickups of FedEx, UPS, DHL, USPS, that kind of stuff, it's just knowing that you're putting it in the right spot on the dock to make sure that it gets picked up.
I had a buddy of mine run a fulfillment center in Southern Cal, and one of his major issues was dealing with loss from, I mean, bluntly, warehouse people stealing products off the truck. What do you do to kind of protect your clients' inventory to make sure that
Sure. There are
your stuff doesn't end up on Amazon from a different seller, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of workers, and I mean, to say that it has never happened would be naive. I mean, I'm sure somebody has walked out with something at some point. The level that we've had to deal with, it's never been an issue. And, you know, of course, we have insurance for gross negligence and things like that and fire. I mean, there's all sorts of different types of insurance that we have to hold. If somebody decides that they're get a little rambunctious with a forklift and stick a pallet, we've got stuff that helps with that. But I mean, in a lot of cases, we just work with our clients and make sure that, you know, if there is something and it looks like it's our fault, it's a couple of units, then we just settle that with them. That's not a big deal. When you start talking about like, well, we're missing a whole pallet worth of goods, then that's a different conversation. And then we have different procedures for all different situations, basically. To date, we have just not had enough of that to be much of a problem. Yeah. And a lot of that, I mean, a lot of our guys have been with us now 2 and 3 years, 4 years. So we're very, very fortunate with our team.
Yeah. Where can people reach out to you, connect with you?
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn, you've got all that kind of stuff. Mark Taylor, Warehouse Republic, all of our stuff goes to the exact same. We've just run a Zendesk ticketing system. So hello at Warehouse Republic. I see every single one of them. My business partner, Abby, sees every single one of them. And so we monitor that very, very well. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's wise to probably give out my mobile number, anything like that.
You never know. I've had people give out some personal email addresses and whatnot, but whatever you feel comfortable with. This has been another e-commerce conversations. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, learning a couple things about the interesting world of 3PLs.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers, and keep on growing.